What's up, guys? Captain Blade J52 here, and it's been a little bit of time since I was last able to get something out there for you folks here on the channel. It's been a couple of months at the time of recording this, and I do apologize for the extended leave of absence I've been forced to take. There's been some stuff going on outside of the game that has been beyond my control. I'm not going to go into too great of detail on that because it does concern some very personal matters. But there has been some good stuff going on outside the game as well. And some of that we're going to be talking about in just a minute. And some of that we're not yet ready to discuss, but once the time comes and the time is right and all the details have been ironed out, we'll actually be talking about some of that for you guys as well. Now, I do want to touch base very briefly on some changes that are going to be going on format-wise to our tank videos before we actually get into today's video. And one of the big things is we finally have a testing grounds again. Now, I know I had alluded to having a testing grounds before. We discussed, I'd kind of alluded to a foundry map being created, and that's some of where we were going to do our testing. However, upon further tests outside of the videos here with my good buddy Timberwolf and another good friend of ours that actually created the map, we kind of decided that due to some of the limitations of the foundry and some other issues, that it wasn't really going to work out as well as we had thought and wasn't going to be able to accomplish what we needed it to do. So we kind of had to look for testing grounds again. And for a lot of you that have been longtime viewers of my channel, or maybe you've just now found me, or maybe you've seen a couple videos of mine, whatever it is, I used to use the Starbase 24 mission as a testing grounds. However, with Season 13 and some of the subsequent changes since then, there's been, well, not necessarily there's been, we've actually lost the ability to solo queue Starbase 24, and since then, the mission itself has been removed for the foreseeable future. Now, hopefully it comes back, but if not, we have a testing grounds lined up anyways. And we're actually going to be shifting over to the Tribble server for a lot of our tests, because it's easier for us to get stuff together over there and whatnot. We're still going to do some stuff on holodeck for you guys as well, but it's just a lot easier for us to get things together on Tribble. We can get the upgrades we need without having to spend a buttload of dilithium on holodeck for you guys. Not that we mind, but it's a lot easier for us to get it together for you guys and put more stuff out there. Now, there's actually two missions in particular we're going to be using as our testing grounds. We're going to be using the Japori Elite Patrol and the Beta Thoradar Elite Patrol. Now, we've changed over to those two particular missions because we feel that they're a bit more of a challenge than ISA and some of the stuff we had been using. We feel that you're going to get better, more interesting results out of those missions. And also in part, I believe it is the Japori Elite mission that some of you guys on console have been using to get a benchmark test for some of your DPS. Apparently, from what I'm told, there's some equations you guys can plug some stuff into, and you can figure out roughly what you should be doing in terms of damage. So that's an added benefit to that as far as that goes. But we do have a testing ground, so we can get into some of that stuff again. Now, the other big thing I did want to touch base on very briefly is something I'm sure some of you have heard me allude to for a while now, and that is the tanking table. So there has been some progress made on that, and for those of you that aren't familiar with what I'm talking about, what I've kind of alluded to for a few months now, and maybe a little bit longer than that even, is wanting to put a tanking table together for you guys. And what I want it to do is I take pretty much all of the sets we have available in game, mission sets, the rep sets, the Aegis set, some of those different items, and kind of put them in a table for you guys. Give them a bit of a rating system, say, okay, this is what I would consider a top tier set, this is what I would consider a middle tier set, and on down the line, and hopefully give you guys some information about the strengths and weaknesses of each of the different sets, and hopefully it should give you all enough information to kind of pick out which set might be right for you and your particular build. Now the good thing is I finally got my rating system sorted out that we're going to be using. I'm going to be collaborating with my good buddy Timberwolf to get everything down on paper for you guys, and we have actually gotten some stuff down on paper. Expect to see that sometime in the very near future once it gets done, and I'm able to upload it to a place where you guys can have easy access to it. So that is something good coming down the pipes, and hopefully you guys can use that as a decent resource. Now, for today's video, we're actually going to be getting into is due to the request of some folks over on my good buddy Timberwolf's channel and a couple of folks here on my own, and folks are wanting to see, what have I been up to this time? What have I been doing in the meantime? And kind of wondering what's new in the tank world, I guess. So I figured I would make this video today to kind of answer that for you folks. And we're going to have some runs with our new testing grounds of Chipori Elite and Beta Thorador Elite coming up in a little bit. But in the meantime, we're going to go over the basic build right fast, explain some of what's going on behind the scenes, and why I've picked the options that I have. So some of you may recognize this particular ship right away. This is actually the Science Miracle Worker ship. This is, I believe, I think this is the Daystrom version. Let me actually find the ship in the list here. I believe it is the Daystrom, but yes, it is the Daystrom. So this is actually the Science Miracle Worker ship, and I've kind of moved away from the Keldon a little bit. Now, for those of you that know me as having flown the Keldon for a good long time, I still have it. We're still going to do some stuff with the Keldon, but as far as my main go-to ship, it's kind of been put on the back burner a little bit in favor of this ship here, the USS Osijek. Now, for this particular ship, I had kind of experimented with the Tucker a little bit, because there's some good options you've got in Miracle Worker for tanks and whatnot, but the more I looked at it, the more I started playing around with different builds, different theories. It just seemed like this particular ship, the Science Miracle Worker, was going to give me better options and better layout for what I wanted to do. So for this particular ship, what is so special about the Miracle Worker ships is that you actually have a Miracle Worker type of mechanic. Now you can see down here at the moment, it's the Barkley maneuver is the current little ability that's up. If I activate 3 tactical powers, doesn't matter, of course, what order they would be in, but if I activate 3 tactical powers, it'll send a photonic duplicate on a collision course towards my enemy using ramming speed, and the abilities here vary from what pops up to the next, and so does the combination of powers you need to activate in order to get credit for the ability. So it could end up being something like secondary shielding. It could be that it buffs your power levels to heck and back. It could be that something like this. So it does vary a little bit. You don't have the control over it like you would, per se, with the command ships or even the intel ships. So that is one of the slight downsides to the Miracle Worker stuff in that aspect, though I can kind of understand why they did it the way that they did. But anyways, as far as our bridge officers and our gear, we'll look at our gear first, then we'll get into our boss and stuff. And as you guys can see, I am a pack rat with my inventory. I've not cleaned out quite a few things yet. Now for this particular ship, I'm actually running Polarons on here at the moment, because I just feel like I'm able to get a lot more damage out of them at the moment, and I'm able to keep threat with them a lot better. Now, I've always been a fan of Polarons since I started the game. The first max level ship I had actually gotten to was actually used a mix of Polarons and Tetrions on the ship at the time, because that's all I could get to drop for me, all I could really do anything with. But anyway, For what we have here on the ship, this is a 4-4 layout, meaning 4 weapons in the front, 4 weapons in the back. And the other big thing about Miracle Worker ships is the universal console slot, which, just like it sounds, is truly a universal slot. You can put anything in there. You could put a tactical console, you could put an engineering or a science, or even an actual universal console in the slot. It truly is a slot that you can put anything that you want in there. So for this particular ship, what I have on here is, up front we have our piezopolaron beam. This is going to give us a nice little regeneration effect. You can see it's the proto-matter regenerative influx to self and nearby allies, which is going to give me some shield regen and some maximum hull for 10 seconds. So it's a pretty nice little heal, and is something that's going to help keep us alive. We also have 2 crafted Polaron beams that have been re-rolled a good bit. They have the crit D damage mod as their epic, and then they have a damage times 4 because we're running on a tactical tune. Then if you're an engineer or a science, it's generally more advisable to run with a crit D4 to pick up some extra crit D, because science captains and engineering captains don't typically have the sources of crit D and crit hit available that tactical captains do readily. Then we have our morphogenic Polaron torpedo launcher. This is the Polaron energy torpedo. Currently, I believe the only one left that doesn't really have an energy torpedo, I think, is actually plasma at this point, if I'm not mistaken. So hopefully we'll get one of those pretty quick. And for the proc that you get on this particular console, or not console, but weapon, is actually the Polaron energy drain. You can see there, it's a, at the moment for me, it's a minus 44.9 to all current power levels for 5 seconds, and it's on a 12-second recharge. Now there are some set bonuses we're going to be looking at in just a moment for this particular ship. Now for the rear weapons, we have 3 more of our Polaron beams, and then we have our morphogenic Polaron energy weapon, and it is re-rollable as well. It is gone to crit D / damage as the epic mod, and then 4 times of damage modifiers. Now what is so special about this weapon is it's actually a omni beam and a turret in one. And whether it fires like a turret or whether it fires like an omni beam, it depends on which modifier you activate first, or which mode you activate first. And I'll show you guys down here. If I activate the fire at will, you can see here for this slot, it is going to fire like an omni beam. So it would fire like a beam, and then if I activate, you can see there, it's now the little beam symbol. If I activate scatter volley, you can see it swaps over to turret mode. So that's how you can swap back and forth like that. Now it does share a lockout with the chronometric omni beam, so that does kind of suck, though to some extent I can understand why they did that as well. But that's neither here nor there at this point. Now for our devices, again, there's 4 device slots. I usually think of them as personal preference. However, I've been getting a lot of good mileage out of the energy amplifier batteries, which is a plus 20% category 2 energy weapon damage boost for 20 seconds. And then the particle flood batteries, which is a 20% category 2 exotic damage boost. So that's a pretty nice little boost there if I want to crack off my gravity well. And then of course we have our trusty Kobali set still. Now I have been doing some experiments with other sets. You'll see some of that coming up in later videos, and also on our tank table some of the different pros and cons to the different sets, including the Kobali set. But as far as our shields, engines, and warp core go, let's go ahead and look at these. We have our Kobali regenerative shield array. And you can see it's got, for me, a 10,000 point maximum capacity, 10% bleed through. It may not seem like a lot of capacity, but with this particular shield, it actually stays up a lot more than what people would think. So then we've got our shield regeneration. We also have our, and this is one of the big reasons why I like the Kobali shields, is it gives a plus 10% boost to incoming hull healing to self. And it also has a nice res all mod, which reduces all energy damage to shields by 10%. So that's a pretty hefty damage reduction, and that's going to cover any energy type you could come up against. So whether you're going against Borg, or whether you're going against the Kentari, whether you're going against the True Way, regardless of who you're going to fight, you're going to have some damage reduction to what they throw at you, which is very nice in my personal opinion. But sadly, the Kobali set is not re-rollable at the moment. But anyways, let's go to the engines next. We'll look at the warp core last. Now for our engines, you can kind of see it's pretty standard modifiers. There you've got some impulse expertise, a bit of sector speed boosting. Now these are hyper engines, so that means that they're going to get more efficiency at a higher power level, which on this particular build they're not going to have the greatest engine efficiency because we don't have that greatest amount of power in our engines. So that is one of the drawbacks to using it on a cruiser, but something that can be easily rectified through an emergency power to engines or something along those lines. But one of the real strengths to the Kobali engines here is you get anywhere from a 3% to a 10.5% recharge time reduction on hull and shield healing bridge officer abilities, which increases as engine power level increases. So the higher my engine power is, the higher the recharge bonus I'm going to get. So this is going to allow me to use my heals quite a bit longer, or quite a bit quicker, I should say. As far as the deflector goes, it's pretty much what you see is what you get. As far as the stats go, I don't really think there's a lot of explanation needed here. It's pretty much a stat stick, and it ties into the set bonuses. That's pretty much what the Kobali deflector does. Now for the shields, the engines, and deflector, you get those from the Dust to Dust mission, which means you have to run through that maze and do the little bridge jumping puzzle, which for some people can suck. But and that's also where you get the Kobali Bridge Officer, coincidentally, as well. Then we come to our warp core, and our Kobali field warp core, or field stabilizing warp core, it's a amp core, meaning it gets the amp modifier, and then it also gets the epic modifier of weapons to shields, which I believe is standard for most warp cores these days. And then you can see it's tailored more towards healing. We've got some hull restoration that it gives us, and buffs our shield power a little bit. And then we get the bonus of a invisible S to A mod, meaning shields to aux. So it adds 7.5% of our shield power to our aux power as a bonus. That doesn't take away from our shield power. That's just a straight up bonus that we get to our aux. And then we also have the recharge time reduction to slipstream. And then we have our amp mod, which is just a straight bonus, I believe, at this moment to damage. And it's a 3.3% bonus all damage per subsystem with 75 or more power. So at the moment, I only have one power level above 75. That will go up slightly in combat and as buffs start rolling in. Then we have add 7.5% of your weapon power to your shield power as a bonus. That's our W to S mod that we're seeing. Now, the amp mod is always nice to have in a warp core, and in my opinion is probably one of the better mods that you can get on a warp core, and definitely one of the best, I would say. Now, the real power to the Kobali warp core is the shield capacitor that it gives you. This is one of the reasons we're using it here. It's a 5 kilometer heal for yourself and nearby allies, and it gives about 10,000 shield regen to nearby allies, almost 11,000, and a bit of shield power. And it's on a 4-minute recharge. Now this, potentially depending on what kind of shield you're using and so on, can actually bring your shields from almost completely drained back to full. Alright, so getting into our set bonuses, this is one of the reasons why we're using the Kobali set, is for the powerful set bonuses that it actually gives. And here we have the 2 set, pretty much self-explanatory. It's a 20% hull regen that can stack up to, I believe, 60% as your HP decreases. Then you have the 3 set, which is the Kobali nanite screen, and that's going to give you some temporary HP whenever you get shot while you're at 25% or less. It can occur once every 2 minutes. So, in a way, you could say it's sort of a built-in auxiliary to structural. Now, the real strength to the Kobali set is in the 4-piece bonus. It affects you and up to 19 other people, so 20 people max. 5-kilometer sphere, 2-minute recharge. And for 15 seconds, you gain 20% of incoming energy damage as healing. Now, that is very slightly misleading because there is a bit of a healing cap on it. Maximum of 20 times per second, always heals between 100 points and 20,000 points. Now, that basically means, assuming you were to get the maximum amount of healing possible, you're looking at 400,000 points of healing per second, and up to over 6 million points of healing over the duration of the power. So, whenever you're activating this, even though you're probably not going to get the maximum amount of healing in total, you're still going to get a very good chunk, and it's going to, in most cases, be well more than enough to keep you alive. So that's not something you're really going to have to worry about too much. It's going to take quite a bit of damage for them to break through that 4-piece. Now, that's not to say you're invincible, but it's going to take a heck of a lot in order to actually kill you while that is active, and it can be comboed with other heals for even more fun and shenanigans. Now we get into some of our consoles and why we have some of those. Then we'll touch base briefly on the traits and our stations and kind of go from there. Now, for our consoles, we have a 4 engineering, 4 science, 3 tactical layout, and then we have our universal slot. Now for our tactical consoles, we'll look at those quickly because they're the easiest to explain. We have our vulnerability locators. I'm using the plus beams on here at the moment because I hadn't went and picked up my polarons yet, but these should actually be the plus polarons in this case. I'm just not had a chance to get out to the spire yet, but that is one thing. And then you can see we have a third one here in our universal slot. Now these are going to give a good chunk of critical chance, and you can see that's about 6% critical hit chance across these consoles, so that's pretty decent to have. These come from your fleet spire. Then we have our morphogenic console, and now that we've looked at our morphogenic console, you can see what it does. And now we're going to take a look at the set bonuses from the morphogenic really quickly, and then we'll continue on with the rest of our stuff. Now you can see here it's gives you a bit of extra weapon damage, category 1 if you're behind the target, gives some drain expertise, gives a minus 10% weapon power cost, so that's a pretty good deal there. Let's go ahead and pull this up. Now, this is, in my opinion, one of the most potent boosts and most potent sets in the game right now that you can get access to. And what we actually have here is, for our 2-set bonus, you get a 15% recharge time reduction to fire at will, beam overload, scatter volley, rapid fire, torp spread, torp high yield, mind pattern alpha, and mind pattern beta. So that's basically a recharge time reduction to your major tactical enhancement powers. And then you have your 3-set, which, depending on which one you use, you get a buff that can stack up to 3 times and lasts up to 45 seconds. Once you hit the 3 stacks, any subsequent activations will simply refresh the timer. So if you activate Fire at Will or Beam Overload, you get a 2% critical chance buff, maximum of 6%. So that's essentially worth 3 vulnerability locators to you. and if you wanted to, you could swap out 3 locators for 3 exploiters and boost your critical severity instead. Then you have, if you activate scatter, volley, or rapid fire, you get a 10% critical severity boost up to a maximum of 30%. Then for your torpedo spread, torpedo high yield, mine alpha, and mine beta, you get a 7.5% category 1 weapon damage boost up to a maximum of 22.5%. So you're getting quite a bit of bang for your buck here. And this is definitely not a set to sneeze at. And if you're going to use Polaron, this is a set I'm going to strongly recommend you pick up from the home mission. It is very well worth it. So that's what we have as far as our tactical consoles and some of our set bonuses. Now let's start with our engineering consoles. First up, we have our regenerative integrity field from the Kobali Samsara, along with our Kobali warp core. Now, the Samsara itself was given away as a 5th year anniversary ship. You can now get it in the Phoenix lockbox for 1 epic token. So it can be a little bit harder if you're just now coming into the game to acquire this ship, but if you're able to get your hands on a Samsara and you're wanting to tank, then I'm going to highly advise doing it. Now for this particular console, it gives a nice boost to our healing, 28.5% hull healing. I believe that is a base heal, so it's still pretty nice to have. And then for the console, it gives you a nice burst heal up front of about 13,000 HP, and that'll increase in effectiveness as your HP gets lower. And then as you're doing damage, you're going to heal based on your directed energy damage. So about 100% of that damage you're going to get. Again, slightly misleading because there is a little bit of a cap, but some. And you're going to get your directed energy damage as healing for 10 seconds. Now it can trigger up to 5 times a second, maximum of 4,467.9 hull restored, which is per proc, which is still a pretty big deal. And then a minimum of 558.5. So you're still, even though it is capped, you're going to get a pretty sizable amount of healing back. If you're using this on its own, or the Kobali 4-piece on its own, or especially together, it's going to take quite a bit of damage for them to kill you, assuming that they even can. Then we have our assimilated module. This is going to give us some critical chance and severity, tiny little bit of weapon power, tiny little bit of passive hull regen, and a bit of control expertise, which is going to affect the pull of our gravity well. Then we have our tachyokinetic converter. It's going to give a bit of control expertise. It's going to give some flight turn rate, some critical chance, and some critical severity. Now this is one of the low-buy consoles, which is a staple console in my opinion in this case. So we have that going for us. Then we also have our bioneural infusion circuits. Gives some hull capacity and control expertise, and gives a 26.2% critical severity. Now I believe currently this is still the highest amount of critical severity you can get off of a single console or item in the game. So definitely pick this up if you're looking to do a lot of damage and everything. Then another console I've had some good mileage out of lately is the Bounty Hunter's Friend. This is a console that I'd kind of passed over for a while because I didn't really think I needed it, but I've started experimenting with it a little bit lately, and it's actually fit in nicely with some of the stuff I have today. And it gives pretty much what it says. It gives a bit of energy damage resistance, so free damage reduction. It gives some shield restoration, so yay, it gives some free healing. And it gives a bit of weapon power cost reduction. So it touches all 3 areas that I like to look for in a piece of gear. It touches threat gen in terms of the weapon power cost. It touches damage negation in terms of the damage resistance it gives. And it touches damage recovery in the shield restoration. So an all-around nice console and everything that I can now fit into my build. Next we have our temporal disentanglement suite. Pretty much what you see is what you get. It's an all-around good console, buffs your aux power a bit, buffs your shield capacity, and then depending on your aux power, you get anywhere from a 0 to 2.5% crit chance, 0 to 10% crit sev, and then you get a 3% shield damage resistance. So all around, a great console, I think. Finally, we have our piezoelectric focuser from our Lucari reputation, and you guys can see that it also buffs plasma damage now. So plasma damage is the secondary damage type you're going to be getting from your Lucari rep, so yay. Buffs our plasma and polaron damage, gives a bit of flight turn rate, and gives a bit of maximum shield cap. And it's 2 set with our Lucari beam, we can actually touch base on, which is a pretty static thing. It buffs our plasma, polaron, and photon projectile weapon damage by 15%, and gives a bit of drain expertise to boot. So, all around, not a bad thing. Finally, we have our universal protomatter field projector. This is going to give some hull restoration and shield restoration static, and this is also going to give a very nice AoE regen buff. While active within 3 kilometers, they gain a 429.3% shield regen, improved by shield restoration skill, and a 430% hull regen, improved by starship hull restoration skill, and that can last up to 2 minutes. Now, I have seen instances in missions where you need to protect something, such as, say, a Federation fleet alert or a Klingon fleet alert. If the starbase starts dipping low, I have seen instances where somebody with insanely high healing was able to come in and use this console and restore the starbase from near dead all the way back to full. So it can happen. It's a very potent console. So you can see we've got quite a bit of healing and damage negation built in here. Now we're going to take a quick look at the traits, skills, and our buff powers. Now for the skills, this is a standard build that I use. I'm not going to go into too great of detail in this video because it's kind of long enough already, I think. I would rather give a video for you guys explaining the more technical aspects of this, because I could make a video on this all of its own, and we can kind of go from there. Now, I have 14 engineering, 14 science, and 18 tactical points spent. For those of you on video, you can kind of see here. This is, you can see my points in hull and shield cap, energy weapons, and I'm going to scroll through it really quickly for you guys. Go down to Commander. So you can see the points I've got spent here, and then into the Captain tier, and then finally in Admiral. Now, one thing I will mention, if you're paying attention to our set bonuses before, is the improved tactical readiness. By pairing that with our morphogenic set, most of our tactical enhancers are going to be at global cooldown or pretty close. In fact, I think right at global cooldown, well, close enough anyway. So that bumped it down to about 20 seconds versus the usual 30. So pretty close to it, but it'll be a lot closer actually in combat. Now, one thing I do want to touch base on really quickly, there's actually one that I'm going to consider mandatory down here for these unlocks for tanks, and one that I am going to recommend. The one I'm going to recommend is your battery expertise, because you get more mileage out of your batteries that way. Now, the one that I'm really going to consider mandatory for tanks is the threat control. While you're not in threatening stance, you generate less threat, and then while you're in threatening stance, you get an additional 100% threat gen for free. So that's a pretty big deal. But that's what we have for our skills, and I'll explain more about this in a later video, companion video coming. Then for our specializations, I've moved away from pilot as my primary because I felt like I had enough damage reduction already. There was other areas and stuff I had picked up some survival in, and I felt I was able to go over to Intel to pick up a bit more in the threat gen department. So that's what we have for our specializations. Now, for our secondary, I actually sometimes go back and forth between strategist and also the miracle worker, because there's some good benefits in both. It just depends on the situation. Now, I like to use strategist because it gives me an AoE taunt whenever I need it, and it allows me to generate more threat while that taunt is up. So that is one benefit that I have, and then some of the healing that you can get out of Miracle Worker is another reason why sometimes I touch base on that skill as well. Now for our traits, really quickly, we'll go through these, and you can see I'm actually an alien character, and I've unlocked the 5th traits. For our space traits, we have a good day to die, which is going to enable us to use our go down fighting at any hull integrity, which is going to be very nice. Beam barrage for free beam damage, and that comes from our beam R&D. I have context is for kings, and it's going to depend on whether I'm getting shot or not as to what I end up getting for the buff. Now, if I got shot within the past second, I get a +3 all damage resistance, and if I didn't get shot, I get a +1% bonus all weapon damage. Now, I believe that does stack very slightly, but that's what we have for that trait. Fleet Coordinator for free damage. I have my Helmsman for free turn rate. Last Ditch Effort for some damage resist when I activate Go Down Fighting. Point Blank Shot for some free damage based on how close I am to the target. This is Category 2 damage bonus, I should add. Then we have our Redirected Armor Plating. This is one of the newer traits from our Renegade's Regret. And it's a +30 all damage resistance rating for 5 seconds. That's whenever getting hit from behind or hit on the sides. So free damage reduction. Then we have Repair Crews for a free bit of damage resistance and hull repair rate, which is very nice to have while in combat. And then we have Superior Beam Training for free beam damage. Now, as far as Starship traits goes, this is where we start getting into some interesting stuff. We have our Redirected Arrays. While I'm hit in combat and fire it while it's active, I gain a duration increase. All Hands on Deck. This is going to give some cooldown reduction to my Psi powers and Captain powers, which is going to be nice. Our Emergency Weapon Cycle for energy weapon damage and a weapon power cost reduction for 30 seconds whenever I pop my emergency power to weapons. So very nice there. Then we have History Will Remember. This is a trait from the new Tier 6 Ambassador class, or the Tier 6 Narendra, as it's labeled in the C-Store. And for each foe that damages me, I gain 1 stack of History Will Remember for a maximum of 30 stacks, which grants the following until I leave the map. So as long as I'm getting shot by new enemies every so often, I'll continue to build stacks up to the maximum. So what this basically means once per foe is, if say I have 3 spears come in an ISA, I get shot by all 3 spears, that's worth 3 stacks to me. If they keep shooting me, I don't get additional stacks, but if a 4th one comes into play and shoots me, I would get a 4th stack off of him. So I'm going to get a +1% all damage, +1% hull regen per stack, increases maximum hull by 1%, and +10% threat gen only while in threatening stance. So that's potentially worth to me up to 30% additional all damage, 30% hull regen, 30% max hull, and 300% threat gen. That's a very big trait to pick up if you're a tank, and something you definitely have in your arsenal. And there's also still the trait Honored Dead as well, if you need some extra damage reduction. But this, to me, is what replaced Honored Dead. And then finally, I have my attack pattern Delta Prime, because I'm using Delta as a tank. This is going to give me some extra critical chance and severity, stacking up to 10 times whenever I get hit while using Delta. So, potentially very nasty stuff. For our space reps, they're pretty much what you see is what you get. I get my Aux Offense, which is bonus damage based on Aux power and accuracy rating. I've got my targeting systems, or advanced target systems, for free severity. I'm using advanced engines at the moment for flight speed and turn rate. That might get changed out for something better in the near future. precision for free critical hit chance, and then finally magnified firepower for a static category 2 damage bonus. And then active reps are pretty much self-explanatory. Biomolecular shield for the shield that it gives, anti-time entanglement for the AoE slow and physical damage. We have our quantum singularity to buff my science stats. And then the refracting Tetrion Cascade can be a nice little aggro grabber in the beginning. So that's what we have as far as that stuff. Now let's touch base on our stations, and then we're going to get into some of the nitty-gritty and what we actually have for our testing. Actually, let's go ahead really quickly and look at our duty officers really fast, so you guys can kind of see what I'm running here, because it is part of the build. Normally I wouldn't really do this, but because I don't like to assume what duty officers people have access to, but since you guys are wondering what I'm using, here it is. So I have one of these guys at the moment, which is going to give me a buff on my energy weapon critical chance. I have my Nausicaan for whenever I'm engaging in Japori. And sometimes I'll swap that out for a duplicate crit chance guy. It just kind of depends on the situation. I have my Z-Mach for reducing recharge time to attack patterns Beta, Delta, and Omega. I have my Emergency Con Officer, which is going to give me a recharge time reduction to evasive maneuvers whenever I activate emergency power to engines. And then 2 copies of a Dakukan for a nice 100% threat generation boost whenever I pop off a Delta. So that's a pretty good thing to have, I believe. So I can get out of this, once I activate everything, I think I calculated to about 1,000% threat boosting. So anyway, getting into our actual power, some of the stuff we have. This is a cruiser with all 4 cruiser commands. We have the Attract Fire, which gives us a bit of damage reduction and threat gen. We have our Strategic Maneuvering for flight speed and a little bit of turn rate. A weapon power cost reduction of weapon system efficiency. We have our shield frequency modulation as well, which is going to give us a bit of damage reduction to the shields and a bit of shield regen. So you've got that stuff going for you there. Now for our threat and everything that we have, whenever we activate our threatening stance, that's going to be worth 300% threat gen there to us. Then we have our threat generation from here from our Attract Fire, that is 400% off of just those items there. Then if we stack up to all of the stacks from History Will Remember, that's 700% threat gen right there. And then if our Adakukans are going off, then we're looking at an additional 200% threat gen there for a total of 900% threat gen. Now for our bridge officer powers, a lot of these are actually pretty standard, I believe. For our tactical powers, we have our tactical team, which is going to purge boarding parties and redirect our shields automatically. This is also going to give some other nice little buffs as well. We have our attack pattern Delta, which is going to debuff foes damage resistance whenever they attack us, and also buff our damage resistance whenever we get hit. Now this is also going to activate our Dakukan duty officers whenever it goes off. Then we have our beam fire at will, pretty much self-explanatory. It lets us do AoE attacks with our beams, get good damage out of that. We have our torpedo spread, which is going to be used to throw extras of our Polaron torpedo around. I think that's kind of self-explanatory. Then we have our scatter volley, which is going to allow us to cheese the morphogenic set just a little bit and pick up the crit sev. So by activating these powers, we're actually going to get, by activating scatter volley, our torpedo spread, and our beam fire at will, that's going to enable us to keep up the buffs from our morphogenic set. So we're going to get all 6% crit chance, all 30% crit 7, all 22.5% weapon damage. So you're getting quite a bit there. For our engineering powers, everything, we have a Commander Engineering / Miracle Worker seat and an Ensign Engineering. Now, we have, first and foremost, our engineering team that's going to repair our hull. It's also going to cleanse certain things like viral matrix. Our emergency power to weapons 2. I went with the weapons 2 in this case because I felt that narrow sensor bands 3 would give me a bit more damage than a weapons 3 would, and you'll see why in just a moment. Now this repairs weapons offline effects, gives a nice category 2 bonus energy weapon damage for the duration, as well as giving us a bit of weapon power and triggering our emergency weapon cycle trait. For a narrow sensor bands 3, this is one of the more potent powers that Miracle Worker has in its arsenal. This is going to give us anywhere from a 50% to a 20% bonus energy weapon damage the closer we are to the target, and it decreases with distance from target up to a 6-kilometer maximum. So bare minimum, you're going to get 20% bonus energy weapon damage, and at the max, you're going to get a 50% boost. So that's a pretty big thing to have. You also get some accuracy rating, and you also get immunity to placate and confuse while that is active. Then we have our reverse shield polarity. This is going to allow us to suck up some damage to our shields coming in and use that to heal, and we're immune to teleports. Then we have our emergency power to engines 1. Now we can rotate this with power to weapons, kind of keep both of them up a pretty fair amount. And this is also going to be good because it's going to give us more power to our engines, let us have some extra flight speed, give us a little bit of extra turn, and recharge our evasive maneuvers based off of our duty officer that we saw. Finally, for our science powers, we have our hazard emitters, which is a heal over time, also gives a bit of damage reduction, purges things like board plasma fire. And then finally we have our science team, which is going to give a bit of shield regen. And then finally our gravity well, which is going to be a nice little AoE kick in the pants to foes, and also a 0 distance power for threat pulling. It's going to group everything up for us, and by a 0 distance power, this is going to generate a bit more threat than some of your other abilities, because as far as they're concerned, because the gravity well is right on top of them, you are right on top of them in their eyes, even if you're at the edge of weapons range. So that's a bit about what we have here with our tank. I know that's quite a bit of information at once and everything to kind of throw out there for you all, but this is kind of what I'm working with right now. And this is what's on the main ship at the moment, and still kind of experimenting, playing around with some different builds. But for now, this is what I have on my main ship. But we're going to come back in just a moment, and then we're actually going to look at some of the testing and see this in action with our good buddy Timberwolf. But for now, folks, I hope you guys have enjoyed this, and we will be right back.
Alright, so you were around for the description, and for a lot of our testing, what we're doing, my good buddy Darkblade is joining me for this. And for some reason he's not talking right now, but it's okay. He's going to be tanking for me, as you've seen in these previous videos, so he's joining me for this one as well. And we're not parsing Beta Thorador Elite. Did I say that right?
Might help if I hit the right button if I'm actually going to try to talk.
It might. But, you know, we're not going to parse this one because this one, as much as it's decent for parsing, this one is just a kick in the pants when it comes to difficulty on Elite. We've noticed that even he can die on tanking in Elite mode, because they ramp up the difficulty in this one. I'm not sure why, but it's fun.
I definitely expect to see a lot more of these Elite patrols, because while we like ISA, there's really only so much you can get out of it anymore. with the way the game is today.
Yeah. We'll discuss that more after our Japoria Elite. There's just not as much of a challenge, and I hate to say that, from the board nowadays. The board kind of easy, and I mean, hell, I want more of a challenge. And I posed this to our group that we normally game with, and it would piss off some people in the game for sure. But I propose, actually, since the ground board have adaptation, give that to the space board. Give them the ability to actually adapt to our space weapons. Now, that's going to screw over quite a few things that we normally plan for, but at least we'll have a challenge from what's supposed to be the biggest of bad enemies in the game. That's just me.
I can see a lot of fun on that, and I can see a lot of downsides too.
You know, I'm just thinking
Depending on how it's implemented. Would give a good chance.
I mean, I am a big Star Trek Elite Force fan, so to see that iMod phaser again would be nice. I think that was one of my torpedoes, and that hurt like hell.
And you guys can see we're just now about to go into wave 3.
Yeah, and this is why we use the controls. You know, on ISA, we probably would have already completed one, be happy with the second one by now.
Yeah, I can agree with that. Ooh, these guys hurt.
Well, I know, I'm just peppering them with phasers.
What turned around here?
Oh, he did.
Yeah. And let's go ham, just because why not?
Okay. So yeah, that probably took, what, 5 minutes right there? 4 or 5 minutes? It's more difficult.
About 5 minutes by my count.
Just a more difficult run. Plus, definitely that, was it, Wave 3 in Beta Thor or Elite, all those Klingon ships? It can get tricky to survive that burst. Unless you're specifically built for it, or you got someone to take all the damage for you, like, you know, Blade. But we're going to warp out, we're going to do a Japoria Elite as our parse, and just see what this thing can do. Like I said, I built it more for telling a story, or as its weapons, and using the console that comes with the starship. Just trying to make it look like it came out of the era with some enhancements from the future. So, let's warp out, and let's see what she can do. We'll be back. Alright guys, moment of truth. We've done the Beta Thorador. But now it's off to Parse and Japoria Elite. And my good buddy Darkblade, of course, just joining for me this one. joining me for this one as well. And we're going to give the tanking numbers for him as well, because he's wanting to record this for his channel. It's about time he got tanking stuff.
So, for those of you over on my channel, you'll get to see it from my perspective. And we figured, why not kill two birds with one stone and make it easier on everybody?
He's good.
Alright, let's...
I don't expect to get hit often, that's why I'm going heavy damage here. It's fun to see this little tiny thing just zooming in and out.
It's definitely one of the more underestimated ships, I think, in game at the moment.
Well, I mean, everybody knows that these T6 Connies. We've seen it, this is the third build in this, theme week that we're doing. So, everybody knows this thing's a powerhouse, but most people don't even get to see it because it's so pricey. That's one reason why I wish they would at least do a T5 variant, so that there's an option for players that can't afford the promo ship. It'd be nice to have a T5 variant going, you know?
I can see arguments for both sides, actually. Arguments for keeping it as a promo ship, and some for putting out a T5 variant, which I'm not going to complain if they do bring one out.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I'm not thinking you make it if you make it T5, it doesn't have specialty seating. If it's slightly less seating, I mean, it's not going to have, you got temporal powers on this thing right now, so... just to give people an edge. Or, I mean, they've talked about it in some of their, hey.
That's on me. I did not expect them to warp in on top of you.
Okay, it's okay. I can make it work.
Got a proto-matter field for you.
They've also talked about their streams for cryptic. They've talked about how they want to do possible missions where you play as a starship to possibly try it out. And we've done that before with the Kobali. You didn't have the Kobali at first, but you got to try out that starship instead. And, that wouldn't be bad, for one mission, give players the option to play as that ship. And it's only locked in that mission. If they wanted to play with a T6 Connie, they could do that one mission, and if they really wanted it for the rest of their game, they know what a pilot is like, they can buy it. Okay, what would you think about that, good sir?
I don't know, to me, the only downside that I really see with those missions, and that would be a good idea for certain, at least if people just want to see, okay, has it turn, has it fly, is... even just the two of us, which I'm sure our viewers have seen quite a bit of by now, is our difference in build philosophy. Whenever you're going in there, whenever you're going into missions like that, if you've got a predefined build that people are basically locked into, then, I don't know, to me it's kind of limited, or limiting, if you know where I'm going with that.
Yeah, I can see that.
And some folks might not, at least in my mind, feel like they're getting the full potential out of the ship. So, maybe do one that's more along the lines of, okay, here's somewhat of a balanced build, here's more of a glass cannon build, here's more of a tank build. Just kind of go from there.
I got that.
Alrighty.
So, give me 1 second, ladies and gentlemen. Oh, I'm already in the proper file. I love it when a plan comes together.
Don't we all?
So, like I said, I'm going to get away from... Matter of fact, let me just get all that off my screen. So yeah, this is the final of the 3 Constitution classes you're seeing. It's that nice motion picture era look. To me, for the longest time, it was my absolute top favorite Enterprise. Hashtag it still is. It's just the Odyssey is a very close second. So, with this theory, and like I said, these themes, as I've said all week and I've said in other videos, it's not about the max damage, it's just trying to tell a story while still doing fairly well. 116.5. And Blade got 54k for his efforts. And that's over a 4-minute, 12-second run. Which is not bad.
I'll take that.
Not bad. My spike in the beginning, we would have ended the run in 50 seconds. My spike was almost 170. But
Jeez.
It's one reason why, and I keep stating this in videos, and I know I have in these other 2 Constitution videos. Burst DPS is one thing, but I want to know what sustained DPS. If I'm going into an elite mission, or we're doing elite patrols, because they might add new patrols, what can I sustain while sustaining survival? So this is kind of our testing ground for that. Is, yeah, we can nuke through an ISA in 2 minutes, and we know what that damage is, but can we sustain that damage for 4 minutes, 6 minutes? You know, whatever the case may be. So, the interesting thing about this is we've got a close to crit chance on here. I've got 41%, he's got 36.8. But his threat, and a little bit that was positioning, his damage in and attacks in were around 79 to 80%.
It's not bad numbers all around.
Not too bad.
And even on the tank side of things as well, folks, for those of you on my channel, is I needed to change the format up, especially since we lost our old testing grounds of Starbase 24, and even then, you know, it did good for testing the survival of the ship, but as far as actually holding the threat, which is part of being a tank, you know, you kind of need to have something there that could potentially pull off of you, and that's one of the things we were missing before, and which now we've corrected that, so expect to see more of our good buddy Timberwolf here on the channel.
Yeah, plus anybody can beat the Borg nowadays, but you know, I use Japori Elite, a lot of the console players use it. Now I don't have the math right in front of my computer screen right now, but for a while now, they have the max health of all the enemies in Japori Elite, the guys that are actually testing for damage on console. So all they're really doing is taking that maximum health number, if I remember the math correctly, and simply dividing it by the time. Now, it's not exactly accurate, and they can't break it down, but it's the best they have, as far as being able to test, you know, total damage of the entire run as far as what the numbers are versus what they can do. And we know it's not accurate because sometimes you can over-damage past what that target's health is. They might only have 5k health left, but you crit for 12k. So, it's the best they got considering they don't have access to third-party programs over there. But also, after a while, it just gets boring fighting the Borg. I mean, at least here, Japori gives me a challenge. You know? It's just, most Borg runs in ISA, you've got a decent crew in there, it's 2.5 minutes. You know, you have to really get a, I guess that would be the best right term for it, a really bad run together where it lasts longer than 5 minutes. And I rarely, and I mean rarely, see those nowadays. HSE, which is the other main testing ground for damage output and tanking, you actually have to have an organized crew to do those. And when you have an organized crew, it's not, you know, a slow run. 2 to 3 minutes, you're out. It just gets tiring after a while to fight the Borg. So we're doing Japori, we're doing Beta Thorador nowadays. Typically, those are decent enough challenges, and it's something different. So hopefully you guys are liking this on both of our channels. We're still going to do ISAs because that's kind of a staple. We can figure out burst yes on those on holodeck, but we want to use these elite patrols as well as further testing grounds. Gives us a little bit more unpredictability, as it were. We hope you guys enjoyed it. This build works just like the other two. And until next time, this is Timberwolf and Darkblade, and we are signing off.
And peace out.